So when I was a kid, I always looked forward to the beginning of Advent because I would usually get an Advent calendar. So I think some of you have probably seen those. In its simplest form, an Advent calendar is like a sheet or a board, and you just open up these little windows, and sometimes there's pictures or like a little biblical saying. Those are nice, but let's be honest, the more exciting ones are when you open it and there's some chocolate there. And so you get to eat a piece of chocolate as you go towards Christmas. And now I've even seen there's even more exciting ones. I saw at the BC liquor store recently, they even have a beer Advent calendar. So one beer on the way to Christmas. But all these Advent calendars are helpful ways, maybe the beer not as helpful, but helpful ways to prepare for the coming of Christmas. And these Advent calendars in some ways can lead us to believe that the purpose of Advent is simply just to mark the days to celebrate Christmas. In other words, Advent is just about waiting to celebrate the birth of Christ. Now, this is certainly the case that Advent is about waiting for Christmas, but Advent is about something much deeper than this. Advent isn't just about waiting to celebrate a day, the birth of Jesus, but we could say it's about trying to open our hearts so that the life of Christ can be born in us, that Jesus can come and live in our hearts. The resurrected Christ, the life he brings, can come into our lives in a new and powerful way. And in fact, when you look at the history of Christians, the celebration of Christmas is relatively late. Okay, maybe like the year 300, 400 or something like this. But Christians, of course, believe that Jesus was born, but it wasn't a date that they celebrated so much. It was, of course, Easter. This was the great celebration of the resurrection. It wasn't until the 4th century or so that the celebration of Christmas became more and more common. And actually, when we listen to the readings today from this liturgy for the first Sunday of Advent, we don't really hear about people talking about the birth of Jesus. We hear about the evangelists St. Luke and St. Paul preparing us to receive Christ, the risen Jesus, into our life. This is what the early Christian message was about. Christ is risen from the dead. He has brought about life, and we want this new life to rise into our hearts. We want, in other words, Christ to be born within us. There was a mystic, Angelus Silesius, who said it this way. He said, "Christ could be born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, but all in vain until he is born in me." Until he is born in me. This really is what we are doing in Advent. We, of course, are waiting to celebrate the birth of Jesus that happened some 2,000 years ago. But more importantly than this, we're expecting or hoping or trying to work to have Christ's life to be born in us, this life of the resurrection. This is really what we see in the first reading in the gospel today, the way that God's life comes into unexpected circumstances to bring light to darkness, to bring life into death. We heard this in the first reading from the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah is active in Jerusalem in a very difficult time. Jeremiah is active around the year 560 before Christ, more or less. And this is a time when Babylon is coming and they destroy Jerusalem. They destroy the temple. It's a time of great hopelessness. And Jeremiah was a prophet who was a priest previously. And for him, this was such a terrible event because the temple where he served was destroyed. The house of God was no more. It was a time of hopelessness. Many people within Israel were exiled to Babylon. The prophet Jeremiah, in fact, is often called the weeping prophet because his message is one of pain. At the same time, as we heard in the first reading today, his message is one of great hope that God is going to bring about salvation and new life into this darkness, into this devastation. The prophet Jeremiah presents us with this beautiful image of kind of like a barren land, and you can picture it, just sort of dirt that's maybe dry. But lo and behold, from this dry dirt, a small spring or small shoot sprouts out. New life comes out in an unexpected way. And this is what the prophet Jeremiah is predicting, that God will come and work in their life and bring about restoration, bring about healing in a very unexpected way, and bring about new life to the people. In the gospel today from the evangelist Luke, Jesus is also predicting the same. Now, Luke's gospel is generally agreed to be written around the year 80 or so, and this is after another destruction of the temple. The temple was destroyed by Babylon in 586 before Christ, but again it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. The general Titus destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and although Jesus, of course, is living much before this, the evangelist Luke is writing after this event and retelling the events in the life of Jesus for this community that's suffering greatly. Their temple has been destroyed. They feel again that God has abandoned them. And in the gospel today, the evangelist Luke talks about how Jesus is in charge. Jesus is in control. Jesus has risen from the dead and will bring his new life to them. Advent really is all about this. Advent is about opening our hearts so that the risen life of Christ can be born in situations in our life that may seem hopeless, that may seem barren. As we begin then this Advent season, maybe we can consider some area in our life that feels this way, an area in our life maybe that feels hopeless, that feels lifeless. What might that area be for each and every one of us? Could be, for example, a difficulty to accept something in our life, some difficulty, some reality that we try to change but can't, that's causing us such a lack of peace. Maybe this is an area we can invite God into during this Advent season to bring new life. Maybe we're struggling perhaps with some lack of forgiveness that is kind of tying us up into knots, permitting us or forbidding us to have peace in our life or seeming to be hopeless. Maybe God during this Advent season can be born in our life again to bring us healing from this lack of forgiveness. Or perhaps we are struggling with some sort of bad habit that's sort of like enchaining us. We can ask during this Advent season for the life of Christ to come into our lives in a powerful way, to give us freedom and to direct us in a new way to act. Advent then is going to go very, very quickly. It's kind of over in the blink of an eye, it seems. So we want to take this time that the church gives us really to use it well, so that we can, of course, celebrate Christ at the coming of Christmas, his birth, but also invite Jesus to be born in our lives in a powerful way. If you look at the bulletin today, there's a lot of different activities that are coming up. We have penitential services, we have the Simbangabi Masses, Our Lady of Guadalupe celebration. There's many ways that we can prepare our hearts for the coming of Christmas and invite Christ into our lives. So as we begin this season of Advent, perhaps we can identify one area in our lives in which we want the life of Christ to be born anew. One area in which we need some hope, we need some healing, and we need some life. And remember then that expression from that mystic Silesius. Christ could be born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, but all in vain until he is born in me. Let us pray that during this Advent season, Christ may be born in each of us.